I bought the tractor for €600 at a farm auction in a small village outside town. Most people ignored it. The paint was faded to a dull red. The tires were cracked. Rust covered nearly every bolt. It looked like it had been sitting in a field for decades. The auctioneer only said one thing before the bidding started. "Runs good. Just don't ask why the last owner parked it." Some people laughed. No one bid. I should have taken that as a warning. But I'm a mechanic, and I've spent my whole life bringing old machines back to life. To me, the tractor looked like a challenge. So I bought it. The name on the hood was barely visible beneath the rust, but I could still make out the model number. A 1974 tractor that had once been one of the most reliable machines ever built. When I loaded it onto my trailer, an old farmer standing near the fence removed his hat and stared at me. His face was pale. "You found the note yet?" he asked. I thought he was joking. "What note?" He looked at the tractor, then back at me. "If there's a paper under the seat, burn the machine." Before I could ask anything else, he turned and walked away. I laughed the entire drive home. That night, after unloading the tractor into my workshop, I lifted the cracked vinyl seat to check the wiring. Something was taped to the metal frame underneath. A yellowed piece of paper folded 3 times. The edges were stained with oil and something dark that looked too much like dried blood. Across the top, written in shaky red ink, were 6 words. "Read before starting the engine." Below that was a numbered list. At first, I thought it was some old prank. A joke left behind by the previous owner. But as I read the rules, my smile slowly disappeared. Because the first one said, 1. Never start the tractor after sunset. And the second one was even worse. 2. If the headlights turn on by themselves, leave the field immediately. I should have thrown the paper away. I should have sold the tractor the next morning. Instead, I laughed and turned the key. I wish that had been the end of it. The auction was held on a cold Saturday morning in late October, on the grounds of an abandoned dairy farm at the edge of the village. A thin layer of fog clung to the fields, and the smell of wet soil and diesel hung in the air. Rows of rusted plows, broken hay balers, and weathered tractors stood lined up like forgotten relics from another time. Most of the people there were older farmers looking for spare parts, scrap metal, or a cheap machine they could restore over the winter. I had come for exactly that reason. As a mechanic, I had always been drawn to machines other people considered finished. Give me a seized engine, a cracked hose, and a wiring nightmare, and I would see possibility where others saw junk. That was when I noticed it. At the far end of the yard, half hidden behind an overturned grain trailer, sat an old red tractor. Its paint had faded almost to brown. Rust covered the fenders. The front tires were nearly flat, and weeds had grown around the rear wheels as if the machine had rooted itself into the ground. Yet something about it caught my attention immediately. The body was solid. The engine block looked intact. And despite years of neglect, it seemed strangely untouched, as if no one had dared dismantle it for parts. The auctioneer climbed onto a wooden crate and began calling out the lots. Implements sold quickly. Engines changed hands. Broken machinery disappeared one piece at a time. Then he reached the tractor. He cleared his throat and glanced at the crowd. "Lot number 47, he announced. 1974 tractor. Condition unknown." He paused. Then, in a quieter voice, he added, "Runs good. Just don't ask why the last owner parked it." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. No one raised a hand. €500, the auctioneer called. Silence. I studied the tractor. Under the grime and rust, I could see a machine worth saving. 600, I said. The auctioneer looked relieved. Sold. As the crowd dispersed, I walked toward my purchase with a mixture of pride and excitement. That was when an elderly farmer standing near the fence stepped into my path. He held his cap in both hands, his knuckles white. His face was so pale that, for a moment, I thought he might be ill. "You found the note yet?" he asked. I frowned. What note? He glanced over his shoulder at the tractor, then leaned closer. If there's a paper under the seat, he whispered, burn the machine. I waited for him to smile. He didn't. Before I could ask what he meant, he turned and walked away into the fog. I loaded the tractor onto my trailer, trying to convince myself the old man was just playing a joke on the outsider. Still, his words stayed with me the entire drive home. That evening, I backed the trailer into my workshop and unloaded the tractor beneath the bright fluorescent lights. The machine looked even older indoors, its rusted metal casting long shadows across the concrete floor. I climbed onto the seat and lifted the cracked cushion to inspect the wiring. Something was taped to the underside. A folded piece of yellowed paper. My pulse quickened. I peeled it free and unfolded it carefully. Oil stains darkened the corners, and across the top, written in shaky red ink, were 6 words. Read before starting the engine. Below that was a numbered list. I laughed under my breath, certain I was holding nothing more than an elaborate prank. Then I read the first line. 1. Never start the tractor after sunset. The workshop suddenly felt much colder, and for the first time that day, I began to wonder why no one else had wanted the tractor. I stood in the middle of my workshop with the folded paper trembling slightly in my hand. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Outside, rain tapped softly against the metal roof, and the old tractor sat in front of me like a sleeping animal that had finally been brought home. I told myself it was a joke. That was the only explanation that made sense. Farmers have always had a dark sense of humor, and a list of creepy rules hidden under the seat of an abandoned tractor sounded exactly like the kind of prank someone would invent to scare the next owner. Still, I kept reading. 1. Never start the tractor after sunset. 2. If the headlights turn on by themselves, leave the field immediately. 3. If you hear another engine behind you, do not look back. 4. If the fuel gauge drops to empty without warning, shut the engine off and run. 5. If someone is standing in the corn after midnight, they are waiting for you. 6. Never follow the tractor if it starts on its own. 7. If Rule 6 is broken, do not enter the storm cellar. At the bottom of the page, in writing so shaky it was nearly illegible, was one final sentence. I thought these were jokes too. Tell my family I am sorry. For several seconds, I simply stared at the words. The confidence I had felt at the auction was gone. In its place was a tight, uneasy feeling in my chest. I examined the paper more closely. It was old, very old. The edges were brittle, and the oil stains had soaked deep into the fibers. This wasn't something made recently to frighten a buyer. It looked as though it had been folded and unfolded many times over the years. I set the paper on my workbench and forced myself to laugh. Nice try, I muttered to the empty workshop. The sound of my own voice offered little comfort. It was already dark outside. According to the first rule, I should have waited until morning. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. I had rebuilt engines my entire life. I trusted machines more than I trusted ghost stories. I checked the oil, topped off the coolant, connected a fresh battery, and bled the fuel lines. The tractor was in better shape than I expected. When everything was ready, I climbed into the seat and placed my hand on the ignition key. For a brief moment, I hesitated. The paper lay on the workbench beside me. The first rule seemed to stare back at me. Never start the tractor after sunset. I smiled at my own nervousness. Then I turned the key. The starter groaned once, twice. On the third attempt, the engine exploded to life with a deep, thunderous roar that shook dust from the rafters. I laughed in relief. The old machine was alive. For several minutes, it idled perfectly. Oil pressure was strong. The charging system worked. The exhaust produced only a faint haze. Everything seemed normal. Then, without warning, both headlights snapped on. I froze. I was certain I had not touched the switch. The beams illuminated the closed workshop door and cast 2 bright circles into the darkness outside. My eyes drifted to the paper. If the headlights turn on by themselves, leave the field immediately. A second later, every light in the workshop went out. The engine continued to rumble in total darkness. And from somewhere beyond the closed doors, I heard another engine start. For one long second, I sat frozen in the darkness. The tractor beneath me continued to idle with a deep, steady rumble, but it was no longer the only engine I could hear. Outside the workshop, somewhere beyond the closed steel doors, another motor had come to life. At first it sounded distant, like an old diesel struggling to start in the cold. Then it caught. The engine settled into a slow, uneven idle. A heavy, mechanical breathing. It was unmistakably another tractor. My workshop stood alone on the edge of my property. There were no neighboring farms close enough for me to hear machinery, especially this late at night. And even if someone had been driving nearby, the timing was impossible. The second engine had started the exact moment my tractor's headlights turned on by themselves. My pulse hammered in my ears. I shut off my tractor. The sudden silence should have brought relief. Instead, the other engine continued running. Louder now. Closer. I climbed down from the seat and grabbed the folded paper from the workbench with trembling fingers. Rule 3 stared back at me. If you hear another engine behind you, do not look back. Behind me. The words sent a chill through my entire body. The sound wasn't coming from the road. It wasn't in the field. It was directly outside the workshop doors. Then something scraped slowly across the metal. A sound like rusted steel dragging its teeth over the surface. I held my breath. The other engine idled only a few meters away. Deep, patient, waiting. Every instinct told me to look through the side window. To confirm what was outside. To prove to myself this was some kind of coincidence. But the rule repeated itself in my mind. Do not look back. The engine revved once. The workshop walls vibrated. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the sound began to move away. The unseen tractor rolled across the gravel yard, circling the building with slow, deliberate turns. I could hear its tires crushing stone outside each wall. Front, side, rear, side again, always returning to the main doors. Like something testing the boundaries. Like something deciding whether to come in. This continued for nearly 10 minutes. Then the engine stopped. The silence that followed was far worse. I stood motionless, listening for footsteps, voices, anything. There was nothing. Only the ticking of cooling metal and the pounding of my own heart. Eventually, I forced myself to restore power at the breaker panel. The fluorescent lights flickered back to life. The workshop looked exactly as it had before. The tractor sat harmlessly in the center of the floor. The headlights were off. Everything seemed normal. But I knew what I had heard. And for the first time in years, I locked the workshop doors before going into the house. I barely slept. At dawn, I returned outside expecting to find nothing. Instead, the gravel around the workshop was covered in fresh tire tracks. Large rear treads, deep enough to sink into the wet ground. The tracks circled the building over and over again. But they did not lead to the road. They began at the edge of the cornfield. And they ended there too. I stood in the cold morning light staring at the tire tracks, trying to force logic into something that refused to make sense. The marks were fresh. The gravel was still damp from the night's rain, and each tread was sharply defined. Massive rear lugs had bitten deep into the ground, circling my workshop at least a dozen times before disappearing into the cornfield behind the house. Not toward the road, not toward any neighboring farm. Straight into the corn. I followed the tracks to the field's edge. The stalks were nearly 2 meters tall, dry and rustling in the breeze. At first, I could see nothing unusual. Then I noticed a narrow path crushed between the rows, as though something heavy had passed through only hours earlier. I crouched and examined the soil. Fresh, still moist, the same tread pattern. Whatever had circled my workshop had gone into the field. And it had done so without leaving any tracks leading in from anywhere else. A wave of unease tightened in my chest. I backed away and returned to the workshop, telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. Perhaps another farmer had decided to play a prank. Perhaps the old man at the auction had spread some local story about the tractor and someone was having fun at my expense. That explanation lasted until I checked the fuel tank. The gauge showed nearly empty. The night before, I had filled it halfway. No leaks stained the concrete floor. No smell of diesel lingered beneath the machine. The fuel was simply gone. I unfolded the note again. 4. If the fuel gauge drops to empty without warning, shut the engine off and run. My mouth went dry. I had ignored every warning so far, and each one had come true. And yet, even with fear growing inside me, my mechanic's instincts refused to let go. Machines do not haunt people. Machines do not drive themselves. Machines do not leave tire tracks that begin and end in the middle of a field. There had to be an explanation. I spent the rest of the day restoring the tractor. New fuel filters, fresh hydraulic fluid, a replacement ignition switch. By late afternoon, the machine looked better than it had in decades. The engine started instantly and ran smoother than ever. For several hours, nothing unusual happened. As sunset approached, I considered locking the workshop and walking away. Instead, I made a decision that would change everything. I attached a brush mower and drove the tractor to the north field. The rule had been clear. Never start the tractor after sunset. But technically, I had started it before dark. That seemed close enough to cheating. The sky turned orange as I made my first pass through the tall grass. The machine worked beautifully. For a while, I felt foolish for being afraid. Then the headlights switched on by themselves. And deep in the distance, from somewhere beyond the rows of corn, another engine answered. The second engine started far beyond the north field. At first it was little more than a low vibration carried through the evening air, but there was no mistaking the sound. A large diesel motor, old and uneven, idling somewhere in the darkness beyond the corn. The headlights of my tractor burned brighter than normal, casting long beams over the tall grass. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every rational part of my mind told me to turn around and drive straight back to the workshop. But another part of me, stubborn, curious, and convinced there had to be a logical explanation, wanted to know what was really happening. I continued mowing. The sun slipped below the horizon. Within minutes, the field was swallowed by blue-gray darkness. The second engine remained behind me, always at the same distance. Never closer, never farther away. Every time I slowed, it slowed. Every time I accelerated, it matched my speed. The note's third rule repeated in my mind. If you hear another engine behind you, do not look back. I kept my eyes fixed ahead. The mower chewed through the grass, throwing clippings into the night. My breathing grew shallow. Then I reached the edge of the cornfield, and saw someone standing between the rows. At first I thought it was a scarecrow, a tall figure, motionless and partly hidden by the stalks. But as the tractor approached, the headlights revealed details that made my blood run cold. It was a man, thin, unnaturally still, wearing dark overalls and a wide-brimmed hat. His face remained in shadow, but I could feel him watching me. I slammed the brakes. The engine behind me continued idling. The figure did not move. I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. Rule 5. If someone is standing in the corn after midnight, they are waiting for you. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes before midnight. I stared at the figure again. He seemed closer now. I was certain he had not moved. The second engine revved sharply. The figure lifted one arm and pointed deeper into the field, toward the old storm cellar I had always assumed was abandoned. The cellar doors stood open. I had never seen them open before. My watch ticked to 11:48. Then 11:49. The figure remained perfectly still, arm extended, waiting. For one terrifying moment, I considered driving toward him. Instead, instinct took over. I threw the tractor into reverse and sped across the field as fast as the machine would go. The unseen tractor behind me roared to life. Its engine thundered across the darkness. I did not look back. I crossed the field in record time, bounced over the gravel driveway, and slid the tractor into the workshop. The moment I shut off the engine, the second tractor stopped as well. Silence. I locked every door and turned on every light in the building. My hands shook so badly I could barely unfold the note. For the first time, I noticed faint writing squeezed into the margin beside Rule 5. Words so faded they were almost invisible. He only appears when the cellar is open. Outside, from somewhere deep in the cornfield, I heard the storm cellar doors slam shut. I stood inside the workshop long after midnight, listening to the silence outside. No engine, no wind, no movement, only the faint ticking of cooling metal and the distant rustle of corn stalks outside the walls. But silence did not mean safety anymore. Not after what I had seen. The figure in the field. The second tractor that appeared from nowhere. And the storm cellar door that had been open where I was certain it had always been locked. I kept replaying it in my mind. The way he pointed, not at me, but toward the cellar. The note lay on my workbench, illuminated under a single lamp. I studied Rule 5 again. If someone is standing in the corn after midnight, they're waiting for you. But now I understood something I hadn't noticed before. It didn't say they were waiting for you to come to them. It said they were waiting, which meant they had already chosen. I forced myself to think logically. Old farms often had storm cellars for tornadoes or storage. Doors could warp, animals could push them open, wind could shift debris, but none of that explained the tracks, or the second engine, or the tractor that appeared behind me without ever entering the field. Around 1 a.m., I finally stepped outside. The night was unnaturally still. The cornfield stood like a dark wall beyond my yard. I followed the gravel path toward the edge. Every instinct screamed not to go. But something deeper, curiosity mixed with fear, pulled me forward. At the field's edge, I stopped. The corn had shifted. A narrow corridor had formed between the rows. Too straight, too deliberate, as if something heavy had passed through recently, and then returned. I took one step inside, then another. The stalks brushed against my shoulders as I moved deeper. The air inside the field was colder than outside. Heavier. The smell of damp earth was stronger here, mixed with something metallic. After about 20 meters, I saw it. The storm cellar. It sat partially buried in the ground, its concrete structure cracked with age. The metal doors were slightly open, just enough for darkness to spill out like a wound in the earth. My flashlight flickered as I raised it. I hesitated. Then I approached. The doors creaked as I pushed them further open. A staircase descended into blackness. Cold air rose from below. And with it, the faint sound of an engine. I froze at the top step. It was impossible. Engines do not run underground. But the sound was unmistakable. Slow, steady, idling, somewhere deep below me. I checked the note again. Rule 7. If Rule 6 is broken, do not enter the storm cellar. I stopped breathing. Rule 6. I read it again slowly. Never follow the tractor if it starts on its own. My tractor had started on its own. The second tractor had appeared behind me. And I had followed the sound of it through the field. I was already breaking the rules. The engine below me revved once. The sound echoed up the stairwell like something waking up. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the stairs. A faint glow. 2 headlights. Pointing directly upward. Waiting. The headlights in the cellar did not move. They didn't flicker like a normal machine. They just stayed on, fixed in place, aimed up the stairwell as if they had been waiting for me the entire time. My flashlight suddenly felt useless in my hand. The beam barely reached halfway down the steps before it dissolved into the cold glow rising from below. I should have turned around. Every instinct I had was screaming it. But something worse than fear had taken hold now. Curiosity mixed with the sinking realization that I was already too deep into whatever this was. One step at a time, I descended. The concrete stairs were damp, worn smooth by years of use. Not abandoned use, recent use. I could feel it in the air. The cellar smelled like oil, old metal, and something faintly burnt. The engine noise grew louder with every step. Not loud like a working machine. Loud like something breathing through metal. At the bottom, I stopped. The cellar opened into a wide underground space I had not expected. It was not a storage room. It was a garage. Old tools lined the walls. Rusted shelves. Fuel drums. Wiring hung from the ceiling like dead vines. And in the center of it all stood a second tractor. Identical to mine. Same model. Same rust pattern. Same faded red paint. But this one looked wrong. Not broken. Not abandoned. Preserved. Its engine was running perfectly. The headlights were what I had seen from the stairs, aimed directly at me, illuminating the entire room with a harsh white glare. Behind it, I noticed something worse. A narrow tunnel, not natural, cut into the earth, reinforced with metal beams, and leading deeper underground. The engine idled again, slow, patient, as if it was waiting for me to understand something. I stepped closer. The note in my pocket felt heavier than before. I unfolded it again. Rule 6 echoed in my mind. Never follow the tractor if it starts on its own. My tractor had started on its own. But this one was already here. As I approached, I noticed something on the dashboard of the second tractor. A folded piece of paper. Exactly like mine. I reached out and grabbed it. The moment I touched it, the engine behind me changed pitch. Not louder, not faster, just aware. I unfolded the paper. It was another list, shorter, fewer rules, written in the same shaky red ink. But the first line made my stomach drop. You are not the first. A cold wave passed through my body. I looked back at the tunnel, and realized something I hadn't noticed before. There were tire tracks leading into it. Many, fresh, overlapping, as if countless machines had gone in, and never come back out. The second tractor's engine revved sharply. The lights brightened, and for the first time, I noticed something sitting in the driver's seat. A shape, still, waiting, not moving, not alive, but positioned exactly like someone who had been watching for a very long time. Then the radio inside the tractor crackled. A voice came through, low, distorted, almost mechanical. You're late. The tunnel lights flickered on, one by one, leading deeper into the ground. The words "you're late" didn't feel like they came from a radio. They felt like they came from the walls. The moment the tunnel lights flickered on, the entire underground space seemed to shift. What had looked like an abandoned cellar seconds ago now revealed itself as something far more deliberate. Something built, maintained, and used. The second tractor idled behind me, steady and patient. The tunnel ahead stretched deeper than I could see. Its metal supports were old but intact, running in repeating intervals like ribs. Electrical cables hung along the ceiling, pulsing faintly with unstable power. I stayed still, waiting for my mind to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Then the engine in the tractor behind me changed again. Not louder, not aggressive, just synchronized, as if it had aligned itself with the tunnel's rhythm. I turned slowly. The figure in the driver's seat was still there. But now I could see more clearly. It wasn't a person sitting inside. It was something shaped like one. A silhouette formed from darkness and reflection, sitting perfectly upright, hands placed on invisible controls. No movement, no breathing, no reaction, just presence. The radio crackled again. You brought the new one. My throat tightened. I hadn't spoken. I hadn't moved. And yet something was responding to me. The headlights of the second tractor dimmed slightly, as if acknowledging something deeper in the tunnel. Then, without warning, The engine shut off. Silence flooded the cellar. Too sudden. Too complete. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the tunnel lights brightened one by one, extending further into the darkness, revealing something I hadn't seen before. More tractors, parked along the sides, not identical to mine, but variations of it. Different years, different conditions, some rusted beyond recognition, others almost new, all aligned neatly, as if placed there intentionally. Each one had its engine removed or partially opened. Each one had a folded note on its seat. My stomach twisted. This wasn't one machine. It was a system, a collection, a cycle. The realization hit slowly at first. Then all at once. The rules weren't warnings. They were instructions for survival inside something that had already been running for years, maybe decades. Behind me, the second tractor's engine suddenly started again. But this time, it didn't sound like a machine. It sounded like an answer. The radio came back on. You understand now. I took a step back instinctively. The tunnel lights flickered, and from deep inside, something began to move. Not fast, not rushing, just approaching, heavy, mechanical, deliberate. A third engine started somewhere deeper underground. Then a fourth, then a fifth, all joining together into a single rising hum that filled the entire tunnel. The second tractor's headlights snapped back on, pointing directly into the darkness ahead. Not at me, but at whatever was coming toward us. The radio spoke one last time. Rule 7 was not a warning. The sound of metal grinding echoed from the tunnel. Closer now, much closer, and I realized something horrifying. The tractors weren't parked here. They were waiting here. The sound coming from the tunnel wasn't just getting closer, it was getting heavier. Each second added weight to the air in the cellar, as if the underground space itself was filling with something too large to belong here. The second tractor's headlights remained fixed into the darkness, steady and unblinking. I stayed behind it, using it as a barrier between me and whatever was approaching. A survival instinct more than a plan. Then I saw the movement. Not clearly at first, just a distortion in the tunnel light, like heat rising from metal. Then it emerged, a tractor, but not like the ones parked around me. This one was longer, reinforced, modified. Its frame looked welded together from multiple machines, like someone had refused to accept that one tractor was ever enough. It rolled forward without visible effort. No driver, no visible control, yet perfectly aligned with the tunnel. Behind it, another one. And another. A slow procession of machines advancing through the underground corridor like a convoy that had been moving for far too long to ever stop. My breath caught. The second tractor beside me responded instantly. Its engine roared to life again. Not started by me. Not started at all. It reactivated, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. The convoy slowed as it reached the cellar opening. The lead machine stopped directly in front of us. Then something shifted inside it. A panel on its side opened with a sharp metallic click. Inside was not an engine, not fuel, but a hollow space filled with wiring, tubes, and something that looked disturbingly organic beneath the metal casing. A voice came through the tunnel again. But this time it wasn't from the radio. It came from all directions. You left yours outside. My stomach tightened. I looked at the second tractor. And for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. A serial plate on its frame. It wasn't a model number. It was a sequence, a code, followed by a marking scratched into the metal beneath it. Return unit. The convoy moved again, slowly, surrounding the cellar space now. The tractors parked along the walls began to vibrate faintly, as if responding to the presence of the others. One by one, their headlights flickered on. Not all at once, not randomly, but in sequence, like they were waking up. The floor beneath me trembled slightly. Then the truth finally formed in my mind. This wasn't a storage tunnel. It wasn't abandoned. It was a collection point. A system designed to bring machines back. Or something inside them. The second tractor beside me shifted forward half a meter. Not under my control. Not under anyone's control I could see. The convoy ahead opened a narrow path through its formation, directly toward the deeper tunnel, as if inviting us to join. The radio crackled one last time. But the voice was different now. Closer, clearer, almost calm. All units return. The second tractor's engine revved. And I realized with a sinking feeling, it wasn't waiting for my decision anymore. It had already made it. The second tractor moved forward. Not fast, not aggressively, just inevitably, like something that had already decided where it was going, and was simply taking me along for the ride. I grabbed the steering wheel instinctively, trying to resist it. It didn't respond. The controls were still there, but they were meaningless now. The machine was no longer reacting to input. It was following something deeper in the tunnel system. Ahead, the convoy parted slightly, creating a narrow corridor of light and shadow. Every tractor in that formation had its headlights on now, all facing inward, all watching, waiting. As we rolled deeper into the tunnel, I noticed something that made my chest tighten again. On the walls, names, scratched into the concrete. Some were old, some were recent, some were barely visible, as if someone had tried to erase them but never fully succeeded. Each name was followed by a number sequence, like the same code I had seen on the tractor beside me. My throat went dry. These weren't random machines. They were assigned, catalogued, remembered. Then I saw something worse. A small side chamber opened up on the right of the tunnel. We passed slowly enough for me to see inside. And I wish I hadn't. It was a workspace, a desk, tools neatly arranged, and a chair, still occupied. At first I thought it was a mannequin, but then I saw the skin. Dry, fused with fabric. The body wasn't moving, but it wasn't entirely dead either. Attached to the wall above it were dozens of folded papers, all identical to mine. Rules, warnings, notes, different handwriting, different ink, different years, but the same structure, the same beginning line. Read before starting the engine. The tractor continued forward. The voice came again, this time not through radio, not through speakers, but directly through the tunnel itself. You met the last one. My stomach dropped. The chair in the side room shifted slightly as we passed. Just a small movement, like something inside it had noticed me. The convoy tightened around us again, funneling us deeper. Then I saw the central chamber ahead. Massive, open, carved into the earth like a cathedral of machines. Dozens, no, hundreds, of tractors arranged in circular formation around a central pit. And in the middle of it all stood one machine. Different from the others. Older, heavier, covered in layers of welded reinforcement. Its engine was running without interruption, producing a deep rhythmic pulse that matched nothing human. As we entered the chamber, all the tractors around it turned their headlights toward us in perfect synchronization. Every beam focused on my machine. On me. The radio crackled again, but this time the voice changed completely. Not mechanical, not distorted, human, tired, familiar. You shouldn't have started it. I froze. That voice. I knew it. It was the farmer from the auction. The old man at the fence. My hands went numb. The central machine in the chamber shifted slightly. And for the first time, I understood what I was really looking at. This wasn't the beginning of the system. It was the continuation. And the man speaking through it was not warning me. He was still inside it. My grip tightened instinctively on the wheel, even though I knew it didn't matter anymore. The voice from the system wasn't just familiar, it was impossible. The old farmer from the auction. The man who warned me about the note. The one who told me to burn the machine. And now he was speaking through the entire underground network like he had become part of it. The central tractor in the chamber gave a deep mechanical pulse. Not an engine reverend, more like a heartbeat made of steel. Around us, every other tractor stayed perfectly still, headlights locked onto mine. Watching, waiting. The convoy behind us sealed the tunnel entrance. We were no longer moving forward. We were being positioned, guided. The second tractor I was sitting in slowed to a stop at the exact center of the chamber. Precision that felt deliberate. The voice came again. Closer this time. You read the rules. I swallowed hard. What is this? I whispered, even though I wasn't sure anyone human was listening. A pause. Then the old farmer's voice replied. A mistake that keeps repeating itself. The central machine shifted again. A panel on its side opened, revealing something that wasn't mechanical in any traditional sense. Wires, yes. Hydraulics, yes. But deeper inside, something else. A structure that looked almost like bone, or root, or something grown rather than built. My mind refused to fully process it. The tractors around us hummed in unison. Then, one by one, their engines shut off. Total silence filled the chamber, except for the central machine. Still running, still alive. The voice returned, softer now, less distant, more exhausted. We tried stopping it. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Who is we? I asked. The silence that followed lasted too long. Then, the ones who found the first rules. Images flashed in my mind without explanation. Not visions exactly, more like fragments of memory that didn't belong to me. A man writing the rules in panic. Another burying papers under a seat. A tractor starting on its own in the dark. And then, the tunnel. Always the tunnel. The voice continued. It doesn't stay in one machine. My eyes drifted across the chamber again. The hundreds of tractors, all identical in their stillness. All connected in ways I was only beginning to understand. It moves, I said quietly. No answer. Then the central machine revved sharply. Every tractor in the chamber responded at once. Headlights flared. Engines ignited in sequence. Not chaos. Not noise. Coordination. The system was waking up fully now. The old farmer's voice came one last time. But this time it was no longer warning. It was accepting. You are the next one in the chain. My tractor shifted slightly forward. Not by me. Not by any control I could access. The system had made its decision. And I finally understood what Rule 7 meant. Not as a warning, but as a transfer. The chamber didn't feel like it was underground anymore. It felt like it had become the center of something much larger. Something that extended beyond the tunnel, beyond the farm, beyond anything I could reasonably explain. Every tractor around me had come back to life. Engines idling in perfect synchronization. Headlights forming a circle of light that made the central machine look like an altar. And I was sitting in the middle of it. Still trapped inside the second tractor. Still not in control. The old farmer's voice was gone now. Replaced by the system's rhythm. That steady, unified mechanical pulse that seemed to replace thought itself. Then the central machine shifted. A deep metallic sound echoed through the chamber, like a lock being released after decades. A new pathway opened behind it. Not a tunnel like before. A wide exit ramp, leading upward. My tractor began to move again. Slowly, guided. The others followed. Not all at once, but in waves. Like a migration. Like something being released after long containment. We moved through the ramp in formation. The ceiling above gradually rose until the stone gave way to earth, and then to night air. Cold wind hit my face as we emerged. We were back in the fields. But not my fields. Not the workshop. This was somewhere else. The north field stretched endlessly in all directions, but it felt wrong. Too large. Too quiet. The corn stood perfectly still, as if waiting. Above us, the sky was dark but cloudless. No stars. No moon. Just a dull, uniform blackness. The tractors fanned out across the field in precise lines. Like a formation that had been rehearsed many times before. My tractor was placed at the center of it. The system had brought us here for a reason. The engine in the central machine still echoed faintly through the ground beneath us. Then the radio crackled again. But the voice that came through was no longer the farmer. It was something else. Younger. Calmer. Almost detached. Initiation sequence complete. My breath caught. Initiation. The word didn't belong here. It belonged in systems, processes, machines, not something alive, not something like this. The tractors around me began to move forward slowly across the field. Not randomly, not freely. They were forming patterns, circles, spirals, routes that didn't make sense from above but clearly meant something from within. I stayed still, unable to do anything else. Then I saw it, at the far edge of the field. The storm cellar, the same one from before. Except now it was open again, wider this time, and glowing faintly from within. The system was repeating itself. But not exactly. It was evolving. My tractor turned slightly on its own, aligning with the movement of the others. The radio crackled one last time. And the voice returned. Not the farmer, not the system, but something in between. You are in the field now. A pause, and the field does not end. The tractors continued their movement. And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the next cycle. The moment the voice went silent, the field changed. Not suddenly, not violently, but like something shifting its attention. The tractors no longer felt like machines anymore. They felt like parts of a single system moving through a purpose I still couldn't fully understand. Rows formed in the field with mathematical precision. Circles inside circles. Paths that intersected without ever colliding. And I was still at the center of it. My tractor turned again, not toward the cellar this time, but away from it, toward the north edge of the field. The corn there was different. Thicker, darker, almost black under the weak, unnatural sky. The radio crackled softly. No voice this time, just static. Then a single tone, like a signal being transmitted. Every tractor around me responded at once. Engines rising in perfect unison. Then dropping. Then rising again. A rhythm, a pattern, a coordination that made my chest tighten because I realized it wasn't random. It was timing something. The field itself seemed to respond. The soil beneath us vibrated faintly. Not from the tractors. From below. Something underneath the earth was moving in sync with us. I looked toward the central area where the buried chamber had been. The ground there had sealed itself. As if it had never opened at all. No sign of the tunnel. No sign of the entrance. Only flat, undisturbed soil. As if the entire underground system had folded itself back into hiding. But the tractors remembered. Because they kept moving. The pattern tightened. Faster now. More deliberate. And then I saw it. At the far edge of the field. The corn was being flattened. Not by wind. Not by machinery. But in a straight advancing line. Something was coming through it. Slow, heavy, final. The same sound returned. The second engine. But now it wasn't behind me. It was everywhere. The tractors around me began to slow. One by one, they lined toward the approaching movement. Like a response. Like recognition. The radio crackled again. And for the first time, I heard something that wasn't instruction. It sounded almost like relief. The harvest line is forming. My throat went dry. Harvest. The word didn't belong in this context. Not with machines. Not with this system. But as I watched the corn continue to fall in that advancing path, I realized what it meant. Something was being collected. Something was being processed. And we were part of it. The tractors began to move again, now converging toward the incoming line. I tried to resist. Nothing changed. The machine didn't respond to me anymore. It responded to the field. To the system. To the harvest. The sky above darkened further. Not with clouds, but with absence. Like light itself was being pulled away. The line in the corn reached the field edge. And I finally saw what was making it. A tractor. But not like the others. Not like mine. This one was stripped down to its frame. Reinforced with layers of welded steel, cables running across its surface like veins. And inside it, something was seated. Not a driver. Not a person. A shape made of motion and shadow. The same presence I had seen before. The system was no longer hiding it. It was revealing it. Every tractor in the field turned toward it at once. As if acknowledging completion, the radio spoke again. One final time. Harvest complete. And then everything stopped. The silence that followed, harvest complete, was worse than the noise. No engines, no wind, no movement, just the field, endless, frozen, waiting. For a moment, I thought everything had stopped entirely, like the system had finished whatever it came here to do and simply paused. Then my tractor shifted, not forward this time, back, a slow, deliberate movement away from the formation. I turned my head slightly, trying to understand what was happening. Around me, the other tractors began to separate. Not chaos, not escape, reversal. They were undoing the formation, rewinding it, like a tape being played backward. The radio crackled one last time. No voice, just a single tone, long, flat, final. And then the system spoke directly. Not through speakers, not through machines, but inside my head in a way that felt like thought itself had been overwritten. Rule 7 active. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard Rule 7 in a long time. Not since the cellar. My eyes darted instinctively toward the dashboard, even though I already knew what I would see. The note. Somehow it was there again. Folded, resting on the seat beside me like it had never left. My hands shook as I opened it. The ink was darker now. Fresh, as if it had just been written. 7. If Rule 6 is broken, do not enter the storm cellar. But underneath it, something new appeared. Letters forming slowly, one by one, as I stared at them. As if the paper was being written in real time. Rule 7 is not a warning. It is a transfer protocol. My breathing stopped. The field around me began to shift again. The tractors were no longer reversing. They were aligning, forming a single straight line from the far edge of the field to the center point where I was. Pointing directly at me, not surrounding, not trapping, targeting. The sky above flickered, just once, like a signal being received. Then the second tractor, my tractor, began to vibrate. Not violently, not out of control, but like something inside it had just woken up. The engine turned over without ignition. The headlights flicked on, and for the first time, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't inside the machine anymore. I was connected to it. The system wasn't moving me. It was syncing with me. The radio crackled again, but this time there was no voice at all. Only a phrase, repeated slowly, like a final instruction being confirmed. Do not exit the vehicle. The line of tractors began to advance. Slowly, uniformly, each one moving toward me in perfect coordination. The harvest was not over. It had simply changed direction. The system wasn't collecting the field anymore. It was collecting me. And somewhere deep inside the machine, something answered back. Not mechanical, not external, but aligned with my own thoughts. Like the tractor had learned how to think through me. The final rule wasn't written on the paper anymore. It was written in everything around me. And it only had one meaning now. There was no getting out. The line of tractors kept advancing. Slow, perfect, inevitable. No sound now except the faint grinding of tires over soil and that low, shared mechanical pulse that felt less like engines and more like a single organism breathing through metal. I sat inside the tractor, but it no longer felt like sitting in it. It felt like being positioned inside something that was moving through me. The field stretched endlessly in all directions, yet everything was organized now, clean, structured, almost calm. Like the storm had already happened, and I had simply arrived at its aftermath. The storm cellar was gone. Not closed, not hidden, gone completely, as if it had never existed at all. In its place was just flat ground and rows of corn returning slowly to stillness. The radio stayed silent. No voice, no signal, only that faint internal pressure, like the system was waiting for a final acknowledgement. The tractors in front of me stopped. All at once. A perfect line. Then, one by one, their engines shut down. Not failure, not shutdown. Completion. My tractor did not stop. It remained active, waiting. And that was when I understood. The system wasn't attacking me anymore. It had already integrated me. The movement outside became slower. The sky above the field began to lighten. Not with sun at first, but with something resembling dawn trying to form through a sky that didn't behave correctly. The horizon flickered, like reality itself was correcting an error. Then, finally, I saw it. The sunrise. But it wasn't normal. It came too fast, too clean, like someone had pressed a reset button on the world. Light spread across the field in a perfect wave. And with it, everything changed. The tractors outside began to fade. Not disappear, not break, fade, like they were being removed from a layer of reality I could no longer access. One by one, they became silhouettes. Then outlines. Then nothing. Only my tractor remained fully visible. Still running. Still connected. Still aware. A final transmission appeared. Not on the radio, not on a screen, but in the way the air itself seemed to shift. A feeling more than words. But I understood it anyway. Cycle complete. My hands finally moved on their own. Not panicked. Not forced. Just deliberate. I turned off the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time since the auction, there was no second sound behind me. No hidden engine. No presence in the corn. No system beneath the ground. Just morning. Real morning. I stepped out of the tractor slowly. The field looked normal again. Corn swaying gently in the wind. No tracks. No tunnel. No cellar. Nothing but soil and light. I walked to the edge of the field where everything had started. And found only a small, weathered patch of ground. Half-buried metal. A rusted plate. Faded numbers scratched into it. A tractor serial tag. The same sequence I had seen underground. But now it was just metal. Dead. Silent. I turned away, breathing heavily, trying to convince myself it was over. Then I noticed something in my hand. A folded paper. Fresh. Clean. No oil stains. No blood. Just ink. One line only. You did not break the rules. You became one. The wind moved through the field. Normal now. Quiet now. But as I walked back toward my workshop, I could still hear something faint behind me. Not an engine. Not a machine. Just the suggestion of one. Waiting. In case the next cycle ever needed a start again. I told myself it was just a story. Just an old tractor. Just an auction find that went wrong in my head. But even now, when the wind is quiet, I still sometimes hear it. Not an engine. Not anymore. Just the feeling that something out there is waiting for the next start. And the worst part is, I still don't know if I escaped it. Or if I was never supposed to. Because some machines don't stop. They just wait for the next person who thinks they can fix them.